Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing okay. It's Tuesday, but it kind of feels like it's been a really long week in some ways. I hope you guys are having an okay start to your week. We finished chapter 11 yesterday, and 11 was the chapter that we actually met Prince Rillian, and they discovered that they had found Prince Rillian. He was the one who asked them to do something in the name of Aslan. And even though they had promised each other that they wouldn't unbind him no matter what they said, they realized that that was the one time they needed to hi, Ridals. They needed to go back on their promise. So they actually set him free from the silver chair. And they now have to get through the Earthmen, which are basically guarding Rillian. And the prince has learned that it's been 10 years since he's been since he's been missing. So the last thing we read was, I'm just trying to find a good spot here. They can hear the Earthmen coming up the stairs. And he says, "Lock the door, boy, or stay. I have better thought than that. I will fool these Earthmen if Aslan gives me wit. Take your cue from me." And he walks resolutely and he flings open the door. And that's where the chapter ended. Chapter 12 is called The Queen of Underland. And so we're going to meet this queen who's been holding Rillian under magical spell for a while. So I think we will start, if that's good. Chapter 12, The Queen of Underland. The two Earthmen entered, but instead of advancing into the room, they placed themselves one on each side of the door and bowed deeply. They were followed immediately by the last person whom anyone had expected or wished to see, the Lady of the Green Kirtle, the Queen of Underland. She stood dead still in the doorway, and they could see her eyes moving as she took in the whole situation, the three strangers, the silver chair destroyed, and the prince free, with his sword in his hand. She turned very white, but Jill thought it was the sort of whiteness that comes over when some people's faces, it was the sort of whiteness that comes over some people's faces, not when they are frightened, but when they are angry. For a moment, the witch fixed her eyes on the prince, and there was murder in them. Then she seemed to change her mind. "Leave us," she said to the two Earthmen, "and let none disturb us till I call, on pain of death." The gnomes padded away obediently, and the witch queen shut and locked the door. "How now, my lord prince," she said, "has your nightly fit not yet come upon you, or is it over so soon? Why stand you here unbound? Who are these aliens, and is it they who have destroyed the chair, which is your only safety?" Prince William shivered as she spoke to him, and no wonder. It is not easy to throw off in half an hour an enchantment that has made one a slave for 10 years. Then, speaking with a great effort, he said, "Madam, there will be no need of that chair. And you, who have told me 100 times how deeply you pitied me for the sorceries by which I was bound, will doubtless hear what joy that they are now ended forever. There was, it seems, some small error in your ladyship's ways of treating them. These, my true friends, have delivered me. I am now in my right mind, and there are two things I will say to you. First, as for your ladyship's design of putting me at the head of the army of Earthmen so that I may break out into the overworld and there by main force make myself king over some nation that never did me wrong, murdering their natural lords and holding their throne as a bloody and foreign tyrant. Now that I know myself, I do utterly abhor and renounce it as a plain villainy. And second, I am the king's son of Narnia, Rillian, the only child of Caspian, 10th of that name, whom some call Caspian the seafarer. Therefore, madam, it is my purpose, as it is also my duty, to depart suddenly from your highness's court into my own country. Please it you to grant me and my friends safe conduct and a guide through your dark realm." Now the witch said nothing at all, but moved gently across the room, always keeping her face and eyes very steadily toward the prince. When she had come to a little ark set in the wall not far from the fireplace, she opened it and took out first a handful of green powder. This she threw in the fire. It did not blaze much, but a very sweet and drowsy smell came from it. And all through the conversation which followed, that smell grew stronger and filled the room and made it harder to think. Secondly, she took out a musical instrument rather like a mandolin, She began to play it with her fingers, a steady, monotonous thrumming that you didn't notice after a few minutes. But the less you noticed it, the more it got into your brain and into your blood. This also made it hard to think. After she had thrummed for a time, and the sweet smell was now strong, she began speaking in a sweet, quiet voice. Narnia, Narnia, she said. I have often heard your lordship utter the name in your ravings. Dear prince, you are very sick. There is no land called Narnia. Yes, there is, though, ma'am, said Puddleglum. You see, I happen to live there all my life. Indeed, said the witch. Tell me, I pray you, where that country is. Up there, said Puddleglum, stoutly pointing overhead. I don't know exactly where. How, said the queen, with a kind of soft musical laugh. Is there a country up there among the stones and mortar on the roof? No, no, said Puddleglum, struggling a little to get his breath. It's in Overworld. And what or where, pray, is this, how do you call it, Overworld? Oh, don't be silly, said Scrub, who was fighting hard against the enchantment of the sweet smell and the thrumming. As if you didn't know. It's up above, up where you can see the sky and the sun and the stars. Why, you've been there yourself. We met there. I cry you mercy, little brother, laughed the witch. You couldn't have heard a lovelier laugh. I've no memory of that meeting, but we often meet our friends in strange places when we dream. And unless all dream alike, you must not ask them to remember it. Madam, said the prince sternly, I have already told your grace that I am the king's son of Narnia. And shalt be, dear friend, said the witch in a soothing voice, as if she was humoring a child. Shalt be king of many imagined lands in thy fancies. We've been there too, snapped Jill. She was very angry because she could feel enchantment getting hold of her every moment. But of course, the very fact that she could still feel it, showed that it had not fully worked. And thou art queen of Narnia too, I doubt not, pretty one, said the witch in the same coaxing, half-mocking tone. I'm nothing of the sort, said Jill, stamping her foot. We come from another world. Why, this is a prettier game than the other, said the witch. Tell us, little maid, where is this other world? What ships and chariots go between it and ours? Of course, a lot of things darted into Jill's head at once. Experiment house, Adela Pennyfeather, her own home, radio sets, cinemas, cars, airplanes, ration books, queues. But they seemed dim and far away. Thrum, 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 went the strings of the witch's instrument. Jill couldn't remember the names of the things in our world, and this time it didn't come into her head that she was being enchanted, for now the magic was in its full strength. And of course, the more enchanted you get, the more you feel that you are not enchanted at all. She found herself saying, and at that moment it was a relief to say, No, I suppose the other world must all be a dream. Yes, it is a dream, said the witch, always thrumming. Yes, all a dream, said Jill. There never was such a world, said the witch. No, said Jill and Scrub, never was such a world. There never was any world but mine, said the witch. There never was any world but yours, said they. Puddleglum was still fighting hard. I don't know rightly what you mean at all by a world, he said, talking like a man who hasn't enough air. But you can play that fiddle till your fingers drop off, and still you won't make me forget Narnia, and the whole overworld too. We'll never see it again, I shouldn't wonder. You may have blotted it out and turned it dark like this, for all I know. Nothing more likely. But I know I was there once. I have seen the sky full of stars. I have seen the sun coming up out of the sea of a morning and sinking behind the mountains at night. And I have seen him up in the midday sky when I couldn't look at him for brightness. Puddleglum's words had a very rousing effect, and the other three all breathed again and looked at one another like people newly awaked. Why, there it is, cried the prince. Of course, the blessing of Aslan upon this most honest Marshwiggle. We have all been dreaming these last few minutes. How could we have forgotten? Of course we've all seen the sun. There you go. By Joe, so we have, said Scrub. Good for you, Puddleglum. You're the only one of us with any sense, I do believe. Then came the witch's voice, cooing softly, like the voice of a wood pigeon from the high elms in the old garden at 3 o'clock in the middle of a sleepy summer afternoon, and it said, What is the sun that you all speak of? Do you mean anything by the word? Yes, we jolly well do, said Scrub. Well, can you tell me what it's like? Asked the witch. Thrum, thrum, thrum went the strings. "Please it your grace," said the prince, very coldly and politely, "you see that lamp? It is round and yellow and gives light off to the whole room, and hangeth moreover from the roof. Now that thing that we call a sun is like the lamp, only far greater and brighter. It giveth light on to the whole overworld, and hangeth in the sky." "Hangeth from what, my lord?" asked the witch, and then, while they were all still thinking how to answer her, she added with another of her soft silver laughs, "You see, when you try to think out clearly what this sun must be, you cannot tell me. You can only tell me it is like the lamp. Your sun is a dream, and there is nothing in that dream that was not copied from the lamp. The lamp is the real thing. The sun is but a tale, a children's story." "Yes, I see now," said Jill with a heavy, hopeless tone. "It must be so." And while she said this, it seemed to her to be very good sense. Slowly and gravely, the witch repeated, "There is no sun." And they all said nothing. She repeated in a softer and deeper voice, "There is no sun." After a pause, and after a struggle in their minds, all four of them said together, "You're right. There is no sun." It was such a relief to give in and say it. "There never was a sun," said the witch. "No, there never was a sun," said the prince, and the marshwiggle, and the children. For the last few minutes, Jill had been feeling like there was something she must remember at all costs. And now she did. But it was dreadfully hard to say. She felt as if huge weights were laid on her lips. At last, with an effort that seemed to take all the good out of her, she said, "There's Aslan." "Aslan?" said the witch, quickening ever so slightly the pace of her thrumming. "What a pretty name. What does it mean?" "He is the great lion who called us out of our own world," said Scrub, "and sent us into this to find Prince Brilliant." "What is a lion?" asked the witch. "Oh, hang it all," said Scrub. "Don't you know? How can we describe it to her? Have you ever seen a cat?" "Surely," said the queen. "I love cats." "Well, a lion is only a little bit, mind you, like a huge cat with a mane. At least, it's not like a horse's mane, you know. It's more like a judge's wig. It's yellow and terrifyingly strong." The witch shook her head. "I see," she said. That we should do no better with your lion, as we call it, than we did with your son." Hi, Deckers. It's Tuesday, and it's 10 to 7, if that helps. I'm glad you're here. That we should do no better than your lion, as you call it, than we did your son. You have seen lamps, and so you imagine a bigger and better lamp and call it the sun. You have seen cats, and now you want a bigger and better cat, and it's to be called a lion. Well, 'tis a pretty make-believe, though, to say the truth. It would suit you all better if you were younger. And look how you can put nothing into your make-believe without copying it from the real world, this world of mine, which is the only world. But even if you children are too old for such play, but even you children are too old for such play. As for you, my lord, thou art a man full grown. Fie upon you! Are you not ashamed of such toys? Come, all of you, put away these childish tricks. I have work for you all in the real world. There is no Narnia, no Overland, no sky, no sun, no Aslan, and now to bed all. And let us begin a wiser life tomorrow. But first to bed, to sleep, deep sleep, soft pillows, sleep without foolish dreams. The prince and the two children were standing with their heads hung down, their cheek flushed, their eyes half closed, and the strength all gone from them. The enchantment was almost complete. But Puddleglum, desperately gathering all his strength, walked over to the fire. And then he did a very brave thing. He knew it wouldn't hurt him quite as much as it would hurt a human, for his feet, which were bare, were webbed and cold and hard and cold-blooded like a duck's. But he knew it would hurt him badly enough, and so it did. With his bare foot, he stamped on the fire, grinding a large part of it into ashes of the flat hearth. And three things happened at once. First, the sweet, heavy smell grew very much less, for though the whole fire had not been put out, a good bit of it had, and what remained smelt very largely of burnt marshwiggle, which is not an enchanting smell. This instantly made everyone's brain far clearer. The prince and the children had up their heads again and opened their eyes. Secondly, the witch, in a loud, terrible voice, utterly different from all the sweet tones she had been using up to now, called out, "What are you doing? Dare to touch my fire again, mud filth, and I'll turn your blood into fire inside your veins." Thirdly, the pain itself made Puddleglum's head for a moment perfectly clear, and he knew exactly what he thought. There is nothing like a good shock of pain for dissolving certain kinds of magic. One word, ma'am, he said, coming back from the fire limping because of the pain. One word. All you've been saying is quite right, I shouldn't wonder. I'm a chap who always likes to know the worst and then put the best face I can on it. So I won't deny any of what you said, but there's one thing more to be said, even so. Suppose we have only dreamed it or made it up, all those things, trees and grass and sun and moon and stars and Aslan himself. Suppose we have. Then all I can say is that in that case, the made-up things seem a good deal more important than the real things. Suppose this black pit of your kingdom, this kingdom of yours, is the only world. Well, it strikes me as a pretty poor one, and that's a funny thing when you come to think of it. We're just babies making up a game, if you're right. But 4 babies playing a game can't make a play world with licks, which licks your real world hollow. That's why I'm going to stand by the play world. I'm on Aslan's side, even if there isn't any Aslan to lead it. I'm going to live like a Narnian as I can, even if there isn't any Narnia. So thanking you kindly for our supper, if these 2 gentlemen and young lady are ready, we're leaving your court at once and setting out over the dark to spend our lives looking for Overland. Not that our lives will be very long, I should think, but that's small loss if the world's as dull a place as you say. Gosh, you gotta really love Marsh Whittles, eh? I think he might be my second favorite character after Reepicheep. Oh, hurrah! Good old Puddleglum! Cried Scrub and Jill. But the prince shouted suddenly, "Where? Look at the witch!" When they did, their hair nearly stood on end. The instrument dropped from her hands. Her arms appeared to be fastened to her sides. Her legs were intertwined with each other, and her feet had disappeared. The long green train of her skirt thickened and grew solid and seemed to be all one piece with a writhing green pillar of her interlocked legs. And that writhing green pillar was curving and swaying as if it had no joints or else were all joints. Her head was thrown far back while her nose grew longer and longer. Every part of her face seemed to disappear except her eyes. Huge flaming eyes they were now, without brows or lashes. All the time it takes to write down, it all happened so quickly that there was only just time to see it. Long before there was a time to do anything, the change was complete, and the great serpent, which the witch had become, green as poison, thick as Jill's waist, had flung 2 or 3 coils of its loathsome body round the prince's legs. Quick as lightning, another great loop darted round, intending to pinion his sword arm to his side. But the prince was just in time. He raised his arms and got them clear. The living knot closed only round his chest, ready to crack his ribs like firewood when it drew tight. The prince caught the creature's neck in his left hand, trying to squeeze it till it choked. This held its face, if you could call it a face, about 5 inches from his own. The forked tongue flicked horribly in and out, but it could not reach him. With his right hand, he drew back his sword for the strongest blow he could give it. Meanwhile, Scrub and Puddleglum had drawn their weapons and rushed to his aid. All 3 blows fell at once. Scrub's, which did not even pierce the scales and did no good, on the body of the snake below the prince's hand, but the prince's own blow and Puddleglum's both on its neck. Even that did not quite kill it, though it began to loosen its hold on Rillian's leg and chest. With repeated blows, they hacked off its head. The horrible thing went on coiling and moving like a bit of wire long after it had died, and the floor, as you imagine, was a nasty mess. The prince, when he had had his breath, said, "Gentlemen, I thank you." Then the 3 conquerors stood staring at one another and panting, without another word for a long time. Jill had very wisely sat down and was keeping to herself. But she was saying to herself, "I do hope I don't faint or blub or do anything idiotic." "My royal mother is avenged," said Rillian presently. "This is undoubtedly the same worm that I pursued in vain by the fountain in those mountains in the forest of Narnia so many years ago. All these years I have been slave to my mother's slayer. Yet I am glad, gentlemen, that foul witch took to her serpent form at last. It would have not suited very well with my heart or with my honor to have slain a woman. But look to the lady." He meant Jill. "I'm all right, thanks," she said. "Damsel," said the prince, bowing to her, "you are of high courage, and therefore I doubt not you come from noble blood in your own world. But come, friends, here is some wine left. Let us refresh ourselves and each pledge his fellows. After that, to our plans." "A jolly good idea, sir," said Scrub. And that is the end of chapter 12. Chapter 13 is called Underland Without the Queen, and so you have to come back tomorrow night for 6:35, and we'll read what happens. We should be almost finished this book this week and then just finish it off next week. So if you have an idea for a book, we could do another Chronicles of Narnia. There are also lots of really great books out there that we could read. So if that's of interest, let me know. And I know Krista and Jake would really like to read another book. So we'll have to see what ones we want to do if that's the case. All right, have a great night, and I will see you tomorrow.